Welcome to the Let's Get Vulnerable podcast. It's your host, Dr. Morgan. Today's episode is a good one. We are going to revisit a topic that I think all of us can benefit from revisiting, and it is the mother wound. And what is the mother wound? How does it impact us? What does it look like if it's showing up in our lives? And most importantly, what can we do about it? So, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. This is something that I've struggled with. This is something that I know so many of you, so many of my clients have struggled with. So, we're going to really dive into this. On a lighter note, I was just randomly thinking about this before we get into this episode. How many of you know what brat summer is? And how did this become such a Gen Z phenomenon? And now that brat summer is over, what is going on for fall? Okay. I know what I'm embracing for fall and what I hope you all are embracing, which is entering your secure love era. It's time to turn the page to have a whole new chapter in your life where you are showing up securely attached. You're attracting the relationships that are meant for you, with ease being the key word. And you're getting the things that you deserve, not just in your relationships, but also in your work life, in your health, in your friendships, in your overall life. I want you to be able to show up securely attached, embodying your highest and best self. That's when life gets really easy. Things get super juicy and fun. So it's time to enter your secure. And obviously, I want to help you do that. Make sure you go apply to the Empowered Secure Love program. We have super limited spots in September, but I know if you have been wanting to do the work and you know that you need support, this is the program. There's nothing else like it. This is founded in attachment style research, obviously has all of the clinical background as well, with me being an actual licensed clinical psychologist. I was able to take all that information. So this is an actual research based program. It's sad that I have to differentiate that, but that's the state of what's available out there on the internet. There's so many people who have programs, but you don't know where their information's coming from. It might just be coming from their personal experience, in which case that may not be applicable to you. So just make sure you're looking into who you're working with, right? And this program is just, I mean, it's been my heart and soul for years and years now. And we've helped so many people heal and become securely attached. So if you know you need support, you know that nothing is changing on your own, that you don't have a magical way to just go read more books or try to journal yourself through it, that you really need the guidance and the support, then don't wait. Go apply to the Empower Secure Love program. Use the link in the show notes. I want you to know this. You deserve support. That's some of what we're going to get into today, is looking at how the mother wound impacts us in that area where we feel like we're not deserving of support, where we need to do everything ourselves. We don't want to be a burden. So some of the most important shifts that have to happen in order to change your life is you have to get to this place where you go, I am deserving of support. I am deserving of doing the work. Okay. So if that's you, time to enter your secure love era, baby. Okay. I've got you covered. Let's do this. Go use the link in the show notes and apply today. Okay. So talking about the mother wound, I think a lot of you already know this about me, but for those of you that don't, I can share a little bit of my story, that I lost my mom when I was 6 years old. It was early December. I remember it was early December because my mom, of course, had done all the Christmas shopping, and she had done it early. She was very organized. And that year for Christmas, I didn't but I remember looking through my mom's closet and her dresser drawers, and I found the gifts, the things that I had really wanted. Of course, my mom knew. And I found all of those things, and it's interesting. As a child, I think I just took that as, wow, I am loved, I am cared for. But I lost my mom early December to a traumatic brain injury. And this was a difficult time because I lost her as my mom. I lost her as a fully functioning human, but she was still alive at that point. She was essentially in what you would call almost a vegetative state, where she wasn't able to speak. She wasn't able to do anything for herself. She wasn't able to move. She was in a vegetative state from when I was 6 years old until I was 26 years old. And to go through that, to lose a parent at such a young age, and then also it's that complex trauma of she was there, but she wasn't. Her physical body was there, but my mom was gone. And instead, there was someone who needed a lot of care and attention, and there was so much stress on my family. And my dad was left to try to figure it out with the help of my mom's siblings, her sisters. But my dad was left to try to figure it out. And it was so much stress on my family, so many doctors. We moved to Austin, Texas when I was 7. It's all a blur. If you ask me about that time in my life, I know I was doing a lot of dissociation because I have years that I can barely recall any details from. I was certainly in a trauma response, fight or flight mode, constantly dissociating. So I can't even tell you when that was, but we picked up from Montana. I was living in Helena, Montana at the time, where I went to kindergarten, but moved from Montana to Austin, Texas, and whole new culture, whole new school, whole new home. And my mom was in this intensive facility, and I remember visiting her there. And I think what was so hard about this experience is there was never this, as a young kid, there was never this moment where I thought, okay, like my mom really is gone. She's not coming back. I had so much hope. And I think the adults in my life were very well meaning that, for many years, I always hoped that she would come back. And I get emotional thinking about this. But, young 6-year-old me just wanted to believe that one day that she would just return and that my mom would be back. And of course, eventually, I don't know at what age it was. I would guess maybe 12 years old, 13, 14, for sure by my teenage years, that it started to really hit me that she was never coming back, that I was never going to have that version of my mom ever again. And the complexity of the grieving was that I didn't actually fully grieve losing my mom until I was 26, when she ultimately passed away from pneumonia. And in that grieving, I think it was like I finally let that little 6-year-old girl grieve. And I was also in graduate school at the time, and I had so much responsibility. But I remember I just thought, I can't go on with life the way it is. I couldn't just show up to class as I was grieving this horribly complex loss in my life. And I'm so grateful. I had a dear friend my friend Carrie, and we went to Mexico. I went to Mexico for 10 days and to Sayulita actually. And I don't know. Somehow I was able to grieve and I was able to feel things and I was able to connect to that little girl, little inner child me who lost her mom. And what's so interesting is that I know that those first 6 years of my life, that there are so many amazing things that I got from my mom. I know by the way that she showed up for me. I remember watching her show up. She was actually a special education teacher. She loved kids and she would show up for her kids in the special ed class. And I remember going to her classroom and seeing how all the kids loved her. And I was honestly kind of jealous at that age. And then I remember watching her at the local coffee shop with her girlfriends. And like she was just so giving and loving. And she was so fun. My mom was a lot of fun. And even though I only had her for 6 short years, I still know that there are parts of who I am that are because of her. And I can accept those really positive things that I got from her. But the complexity of the grieving of not having the mom figure in my life, because my dad went on to remarry, and unfortunately I'm one of those cases where it was kind of an evil stepmother scenario. And I did not feel loved. In fact, I felt very controlled and neglected and manipulated at times. And I had a very toxic relationship with my stepmother. Even though I was trying to do everything to be loved, I never felt good enough. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel valued. I felt like a burden to my stepmom. And there's some experiences there that I can also pull from. So not only do I have this traumatic loss at 6 years old where all of a sudden my mom was taken from me, I also then experienced a woman coming into my life and making me call her mom. And unfortunately, she really struggled with her mental health. And because of her own mental health struggles, she was not able to be present for me. And not only was she not able to be present, she was actually harmful. And I think some of you listening, you probably relate to me. Either you experienced a traumatic loss, or maybe you had a parent that for whatever reason, maybe there was an alcoholic mother, maybe it was a mom who had bipolar disorder or depression, but you had a mom who wasn't able to show up for you in the ways that you needed. And what I know is that when we're children, we need a parent that is safe physically, emotionally safe, and a parent who's highly attuned to our needs, who can show up in a securely attached way where the child can feel cared for and the child simultaneously does not feel responsible for the mother's happiness. A lot of times, what happens in the mother wound is somewhere along the way in the relationship with your mom, maybe you began to prioritize your mom's well-being, or you took on the responsibility of making your mom happy, right? And that I can relate to that in the relationship I had with my stepmother, of feeling like walking on eggshells, trying to do the things that would make her happy, and God forbid if I did something that that was not what she wanted, and constantly being attuned to my parents' needs instead of the parent being attuned to the child's needs. So we know that parents make this commitment that when they're in a healthy relationship with the child, they're going to prioritize the child's needs, right? That's a relationship where it's healthy and normal for the parent to prioritize, and it's not necessarily reciprocal. The child doesn't have capacity to care for the parent. Yet, so many of us and so many of you listening right now, I just know by statistics. I know how many people are listening to this probably, and I know the percentage of you. There are so many of you listening to this right now that you were a parentified child. You were made to care for your parent. And unfortunately, that's really hurt you in your adult relationships. I'm so emotional today, but this is an emotional topic, so I can let myself be emotional. But I have so much sadness about this because I know that there are so many of you that are walking around and you're in relationships and you're over functioning and you're over giving and you've lost your sense of self and you're finding yourself in these unhealthy relationship dynamics. And I want to talk to you about what are some of the things that you might be experiencing if you have a mother wound. I have a list here that I wrote out. Okay, so let's go through this list and just do me a favor, be really honest with yourself. Do you identify with any of these things? Number one is a strong sense of shame and feeling it's this, and sometimes this is unconscious for people, so you may not be consciously aware of it, but just feeling like that there's something wrong with you, that you are really hard to love. There's something wrong with you. You're really hard to love. And for a lot of you, that was the message you got as a child, right? And I do want to just say this because I think it's important to say. I believe that most parents are doing the best they can with what they have. And we can know that. We can know these two truths simultaneously. This is called a dialectic. It seems like two opposing things, but they're both true. So these two truths are this: your parents were doing the best that they could, and there are ways that they failed you. There are ways that they failed you. And in this mother wound, it's this awareness that for whatever reason, your mom was lacking capacity to show up for you and to give you the attention, the reassurance, the support, build a secure attachment. She wasn't able to do that, and that led you to believe that you were difficult to love, that you were hard to love. So lots of shame is common. What else? Guilt. So guilt is interesting. Guilt shows up in a ton of different ways. It could be guilt. You feel like you should have done more, whether it was in your career or maybe you even have a sense of guilt towards your mom, of feeling like, oh, I should have done more for my mother, or if only I had been different. This is common. If only I had been different, then my mother would have been happy. If only I had done ballet, or if I'd gotten into Harvard, then my mother would be happy, right? You have all this guilt. You've placed your mother's happiness onto yourself. What else? Unhealthy anger. I see this a lot. Where you have a lot of anger, and a lot of times it's turned inwards. It's turned inwards, or it's coming out sideways. It's coming out with you being in your masculine energy all the time. You have all this unresolved anger, and it's coming out as this need to control, and maybe it's this need to be aggressive even, but unhealthy anger, right? There's healthy anger. Anger is healthy. We need to feel anger, but then unhealthy anger when it's not managed, it's coming out sideways. So it's anger towards your mom that was never safe for you to express, that then you're expressing towards yourself, which leads to depression, or you're having it come out in other ways too. And one of the ways is always being in your masculine energy and never feeling safe enough to relax into your feminine self, which is also a whole other topic. But when we're angry, when we're in protective mode and we have unhealthy anger, we're not going to easily go into our feminine energy place, right? Okay, what else happens? So another sign is that if you, and this one makes me sad because I know I experienced this. I am so sad today, you guys. I'm sorry. I hope that you're not, you might be getting sad listening to this episode. So just know if you are, I'm sending you a big hug. We are in this together. Okay. So this one makes me sad because I experienced this, which is if you experienced neglect, and this isn't just, oh, you didn't have food, you didn't have shelter, you didn't have, I don't know, clothes to wear. There's obviously physical neglect, and some of you listening did experience neglect in that way, but there's also emotional neglect. Do you know how powerful it is when an adult is curious about a child's experience, curious about what they're feeling, curious about what's going on for them at school, curious about what's your favorite game to play, what's your favorite show to watch? When an adult is really emotionally available and emotionally present, that is so felt by a child, right? You feel so valued, you feel important, you feel like you matter. And so many of you didn't have parents that were showing up in an emotionally available way for you, and you experienced neglect. And what I want you to know is that that impacts how you show up for yourself and how you show up for others. So a lot of you might be neglecting yourself. If you have a mother wound, you might not be able to show up and ask yourself, what do I need? How do I care for myself at a really high level? What are the things that light me up and the things that I want to do with my life? You might be neglecting your desires, right? There's all kinds of ways that neglect can show up, but it's not giving yourself the love and the emotional availability and the curiosity that you deserve. And then, of course, it can show up if you didn't have it modeled for you. How can you do it really well for other people? So you might also be then neglecting the people in your life, and it's a vicious cycle. This is why we talk about breaking the cycles. We want to stop these things, right? You don't want to be neglectful towards your partner, towards your children, towards your friends. Neglect is not a cycle that any of us want to continue. So another sign is being overly critical. A lot of times with a mother wound, you probably had an overly critical mother. I can relate to that with my stepmom. And when you experience a lot of criticism, of course, you're then going to be very critical towards yourself, and you're also going to be critical towards others. And what can happen is it's I think it's wired. It becomes wired into your way of being and your brain's blueprint, if you will, when it comes to relationships. So if you experience that from your parent, then you may also show up that way, whether it's, once again, relationships with a partner, relationships with kids, but being overly critical. And I think there's many reasons why it happens, but if you experience that from your mom, then you may associate that with love, right? You may associate being critical with, oh, that's what you do when you're in a close relationship, or realizing that the criticism really is a lot more about your own fears, your own lack of control, things that are really hard for you to process. So once again, we have to break these cycles. No one enjoys being critical. Even in when I, did a lot of couples therapy, and you have the wife who's nagging all the time, which everyone hates that term. Okay, let's just get rid of it. But I know that person, that's not how they want to show up. It's not like they enjoy it, right? But that can come from the mother wound. That can come from not being able to be in tune with your emotions and your needs. And instead of communicating authentically and relationally, having to show up protective and controlling and using criticism instead of vulnerability, right? So, another sign, and this one's really interesting. I've been thinking about this a lot, having a mother wound. If you have a mother wound, sometimes you can have fear of success. You can have fear of actually fulfilling your potential. Because for some of you, you were made to feel that you couldn't be quote unquote better than your mother. You were made to feel that you had to be small, that for some reason you had this feeling that you were in competition with your mom. And that was due to your mom's insecurity. So her own insecurity, comparing herself to you even, and you were made to feel, I don't want to make my mom feel bad. I can't be better than my mom. My mom told me I would never be better than her. There's all kinds of different ways this can show up. But what the symptom is that you have this deep rooted fear of success, of becoming your highest and best self. And that if you do, that somehow you would lose your mother. So these are some of the signs of the mother wound. And I think another one I would add to this is, and I talk about this all the time, but just not being able to regulate your emotions, experiencing a lot of big emotions, a lot of messy emotions, and struggling to regulate them. Because if we didn't have that nurturing, loving, supportive, stable mother, we never learned how to regulate our emotions. We didn't have someone showing up that way for us. So then we didn't learn how to do it for ourselves. So trouble with emotional regulation is absolutely common with the mother wound. And then the final sign I'll mention, which you all know, of course I have to mention this, I am the attachment style expert, is an insecure attachment style, whether it's an anxious attachment style, a disorganized attachment style, or avoidant attachment. If you're showing up with a dysregulated attachment system in your relationships, it's likely that you have a wounding of some kind, whether it's mother wound, father wound, you have a wounding. It's highly, highly likely. Okay. So now that we've talked about the signs, we've explored the mother wound, I think it's really important to give yourself compassion if you identify with this and realize that one of the things that needs to shift for you, so I want to get into how do we change this. One of the core things that needs to shift for you is you need to start having an attitude of love, compassion, and nurturing towards yourself. This is one of the first things that absolutely has to change. You have to be able to start tuning inwards, being attentive to your inner experience, getting curious about what am I experiencing? What are my emotions? What are my needs? Right? Because for so many of us, the mother really, when it's wounded, it basically breaks down this system of nurturing and care and love for ourselves. I'm trying to think about how to express this, but it's this experience that is much more felt. Like I think sometimes these concepts can be hard to express with words because they're so emotional. It's not necessarily logical. So if you're trying to figure this out with your brain, can you try to figure it out with your emotional self instead as I'm talking about this? It's going to resonate more. But this felt sense of so this is what needs to change. This felt sense of I am deserving of knowing what my emotions are, knowing what my needs are, and of receiving nurturing and love and care. So there's this awareness, this knowing that we're so deserving of it, right? And then we also have to start putting it into practice of what does it look like? What does it look like to really show up for yourself, to really be attuned to what your needs are, to stop always focusing on the needs of others? Because with the mother wound, so many of us, we are over functioning for the people in our lives. We're highly tuned in to what everyone else needs, what everyone else thinks, what our boss wants us to do, what our friends want to do, etc. And we really need to learn, okay, how do I tune into me and nurture myself? And I think for a lot of you, it's not comfortable. You're not comfortable with receiving nurturing. So, one of the first things to do is just to start practicing this. I tell my clients, set a timer on your phone 3 times a day. I like to do this morning, noon, night, right? Just 3 times a day. You could pair it with a meal if you eat at that time. And then ask yourself when this timer goes off, ask yourself, what am I feeling? Be curious about your inner experience. What is going on for me? What am I feeling? And then what do I need to be better supported? Get curious about your needs. And then you want to start practicing honoring your needs. I know this sounds so basic, but for a lot of you that have brains that are, once again, they're focused on the needs of others, they're focused on pleasing other people. It's can be in that survival mode of how do I perform and be good enough for others, right? If your brain is there, then you need to take it back to this basic level of rewiring your brain to learn to tune into yourself and to do it in a loving, kind, nurturing, compassionate way. So that's where I would want you to start. And then obviously, if you have not taken the attachment style quiz, go take the attachment style quiz. Okay. I'm going to put it in the link in the show notes. And take the attachment style quiz. And then if you're also listening, you're like, wow, Dr. Morgan, I need your help. Go apply to the Empowered Secure Love program. Let's help you enter your secure love era. Because the next step that I'm going to talk to you about healing the mother wound, this is so hard to do by yourself. I don't really recommend doing this by yourself. And this is addressing the pain at the root, going back to that relationship, going back to the woundings, processing it as the child and also as the healthy, secure adult. So this is inner child work. This is, if you will, this is a lot of what Dr. Schwartz talks about. Why am I blanking on? I'm blanking. Oh, you guys, this is such an emotional topic. This is what happens. My brain is like, I know what it is though. This is the work of internal family systems, IFS, where we're identifying the different parts of ourself. Okay. So I can identify, oh, I have the healthy, secure, relational adult. I'm building that identity. But then I also have this inner child that was wounded who's still really upset. And I have to be able to hear that experience. I have to know what was the experience of that inner child. And then I have to process it. I have to get it out. I have to release it fully, right? So that I'm no longer carrying it around and I'm no longer carrying it into my adult relationships. And sometimes, not always, sometimes this involves redefining your relationship with your mom. And sometimes it doesn't. If your mom is no longer in this world, such as the case for me, or if that kind of interaction just simply would not be healthy, then of course it's not going to be accessible for you. But there are still ways to process, and I believe redefine that relationship on a spiritual level, even without your mom being present or without having a direct conversation. And you really owe it to yourself that if you've identified the mother wound and you've identified that there are things that are left that have never been said, that are unfinished business, that are woundings from childhood, you deserve to no longer carry that around. It's like walking around with a backpack of bricks and you're carrying it around and it's heavy and it's weighing you down. And then guess what? You're also attracting people into your life that will help you recreate this dynamic and that keep the wounding going. So you never get out of the cycle. That's why it's so important to do the work on yourself. It's so important to heal because you deserve to obviously set this down because it's very heavy. You deserve to set it down so you can go live your best life at your highest and best, most securely attached version of you. You deserve that. And then you also deserve to start attracting people into your life that are not repeating this wounding cycle because we're attracting people that will mirror those wounds to us, right? So, those are the two things I would want you to start with. And those are both major steps. But number one, I talked to you about okay, you need to start building the relationship with yourself, training your brain to tune inwards. You can set that timer on your phone 3 times a day. Let me know if you do it. Go shoot me a DM on Instagram at Dr. Morgan Coaching. And then the next thing is, once again, going to the root, doing the processing, letting go of that unfinished business, right? That is so key. And we do that inside of the Empowered Secure Love program. I personally believe you need to do that with help. I don't recommend doing it by yourself. Been there, done that, tried to do it by myself, didn't really work. We never go deep enough if we don't have support. And I want you to realize how if you have a mother wound, you're probably somebody who's so resistant to getting help. You've probably listened to me talk about the program and invite you to apply and tell you about the support and all the coaching sessions. You probably listen to me and you go, oh, that's for other people, but I don't need that. Let me tell you, it's probably because you have beliefs that you're not worthy of support. Okay. You're not worthy of their nurturing. You're not worthy of having help. And I want you to know this, you are worthy of having help. You are worthy of nurturing. You are worthy of support. Okay. So part of breaking the mother wound is making that decision of, okay, yes, I will get help. I will get support. I'm deserving of this. I'm not a burden. I'm not a burden. I don't have to be hyper independent. I can ask for help. I can ask for support. Okay. I want you to know that. All of you listening, I just really hope that you take some time to let this episode sink in. Maybe you have to listen to it again, but I want you to really think about, okay, how is the mother wound showing up in my life? How can I stop this? And obviously, if you feel called, now is the time to apply to the program. And I would love to support you in doing this life-changing, transformative work. So just go use the link in the show notes. All right, y'all. I'm sending you so much love, so much support. And of course, as always, I'm wishing you high self-worth and great relationships. I'll talk to you soon.